Hello and welcome to the Talk Seagulls podcast or show. Everyone was debating as to what it should be called, and to be honest, I've actually forgotten what episode we're at, and that goes to show how well we've started off with this show so far. But we're in Grand Central in Brighton, just outside Brighton Station. Make sure you come along here on a match day or any other day as well. I'm joined by Robert Dugmore. Robert, nice to meet you. Actually, I've not seen you in the flesh before. How are you doing?
Yeah, we were just saying that, weren't we? It's weird. We've kind of had a virtual relationship for a long time. So nice to meet you in person finally.
Nice. And Albion commentator for the 2021s. What's it like? I mean, this is. I think it's quite interesting because I don't really know anything about commentating, and I'm sure a lot of people that are following this are thinking, how do you even become a commentator? But you know, I'm sure when people hear your voice, they'll probably recognise it from a few Mopé moments.
Perhaps, yeah. So it'll either be myself or Steve's that you recognise, because we've got quite a good team of commentators at the club. And as you say, I lead the commentary for the under-21s, which is really fascinating. I'll come on to that in a bit more depth in a moment. And then the first team is led by a guy called Steve. And then we've also got Matt, who is working on the Women's Super League coverage. And then we kind of chop and change when needed as well. So I'll step in to do the first team commentary when needed, which I obviously love. You mentioned the Mopé screaming moment from Boxing Day a few seasons ago, which was great fun. The Mitoma one as well from the Liverpool game right at the end of the FA Cup was one where I got to get a bit excited. Which is great.
Yeah, you did do that, didn't you? That must have been magic, that moment.
Oh, it was, yeah. And I think because of our worldwide fan base, you know, it's had a good few views on YouTube. But more than that, I think most commentators will say it's not about necessarily views, it's about the craft of commentary. I always liken it to a round of golf. You never really have a perfect round. You know, you can have your best commentary ever will still not quite be perfect because it's 90 minutes of football. So you're never going to get absolutely everything bang on. So if you get a big moment right, it's quite good. And in terms of my story, as I was mentioning there, you know, as like many other commentators, I'm not a full-time commentator.
Yeah, this is mind-blowing to me. Well, how is that even possible? To me, I read you as a person. I'm like, commentator, surely. But no, it's not like that.
Yeah, you know, that would be the dream role, and I will never say never, but I have a day job as well, full-time job. I'm part-time commentator with the club, so freelance with the club and freelance with a few other opportunities as well. Up in London for Radio London and TalkSport International. So I kind of do it, I do it for the love of the game rather than necessarily being paid. But equally, if Match of the Day came calling one day, I'm sure I wouldn't turn them down.
Well, I know he's probably your friend, but you're going to be pushing for that first team role. I mean, you're a Brighton fan yourself. That must be the dream role without putting yourself out there too hard.
Yeah, I think that's the dream kind of part-time role, definitely. Yeah. You know, but there's no one desire from me to want to kick Steve out of the way, because Steve is absolutely brilliant. As I say, he's probably the voice that you guys recognise the most. He does the vast majority of the games on commentary, and he's sensational. It's the same for Matt Drabble as well. He's a brilliant commentator. So it's a competitive industry, but between the three of us, we're not competitive like that. So I'm sure whenever Steve hangs up his mic, I'll be jumping in, no worries.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting to me because commentary is like one of the most important and significant things of football. Like if you in the old days, when if you weren't at the game, you couldn't watch it and you'd have to listen to it on the radio or whatever. You got Johnny Cantor, for example, on BBC Sussex or whatever, and that's what you'd listen to hear the game. Yeah. But those voices are so iconic, and I find that, you know, it's not your face, is it? Sometimes no one will ever know what you look like, and it will just be behind the mic. What's that like to know that people would recognise your voice, but maybe wouldn't recognise the face? That's quite weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's probably the best of both worlds. I mean, I've never had a big desire to become a famous person, but equally, if I did, it probably would be the best of both worlds, because you can have a recognisable voice and name without being recognisable as a face.
Yeah.
So it's great, and there are so many commentators, you say, so many iconic commentators, or even well-known commentators, we just don't know their voice. So Guy Mowbray, Steve Wilson, a lot of people don't know what these guys look like.
It is quite mad to me, because as I say, it is. I remember when it was the sort of FIFA stuff. That must be a dream for you. Come on now. Get on a video game would be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool.
John Motson is the first one that comes to mind, and of course Peter Brackley Obviously we missed Peter Brackley as well, big Brighton fan as well. When I was doing my audio description when I first started out, I remember he would actually sit just behind me. So
really?
Peter Brackley may know the voice from, he was the Pro Evo commentator voice. So I think of him for Pro Evo, and I think of FIFA growing up, it was John Motson. And yeah, he was obviously one of my favourite commentators as well.
Do you look at football differently maybe when you've been commentating? Because I feel like even since I've been doing this stuff, I've looked at football way different to how I was. I'm a Brighton fan since forever, but I feel like the way in the last couple of years I look at the game is slightly different to maybe how I used to. Do you feel the same since not just being closer to the club, but you've got more to consider, haven't you? You're literally visualising the game through voice.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the questions I get asked all the time is, how do you keep yourself composed when Brighton score or if Brighton concede late on? I find it quite easy, and I think a lot of commentators do, because you're so focused with the prep and also just trying to deliver those big moments well. Kind of like this impartiality blanket falls over you before you start. And so you're just worried about calling the game as best you can. So as I say, the big moments, but also trying to be as fair as possible. So I'm a huge Brighton fan, but I always want to cover the game in the most unbiased way possible. Yeah. Which when doing it for the club is interesting because obviously you want to be more excited
be a little
about
bit biased on that.
Yeah, exactly. But equally, if we've been beaten 4-1 by Manchester City and they've deserved it, you have to tip your cap to them and say they played incredibly, as so often they have done under Pep Guardiola down the years against us. Because that's the story of the game. But then equally, you still want to be that little bit more excited for the Albion.
Yeah, I feel like because we're on the subject of Brighton, we need to talk about them this season. It's been a magic year, I think, for a lot of reasons. It's been very difficult, but just in your sort of opinion, Europa League, obviously debut season, it's been tough, but it's been good. I think a lot of things that's going to come out, as we said in the last episode, it's a learning curve. Do you agree? I mean, is it a massive learning curve? Not just for the players, not just for the staff, not even just for the manager, but fans, everyone involved with the club have probably learned so much in the last 6 months than they would have done for the last 10 years.
Definitely, and I think that was highlighted. This is only just one example in recent history, but the Roma 2 legs highlighted that well. The first leg, really. Roma have that. They're a huge club. They have that European pedigree, used to the different volatile atmospheres, and that showed in the first leg, really. We created some good chances, but still made a couple of great saves as well. And I think that kind of typified where we are. That's in a season or a couple of seasons' time where we want to be properly challenging over 2 legs, because that's our first 2-legged competitive European fixture in the Europa League. So, yeah, I think there's nothing to be too disheartened about, far from it. I think it's naturally there was always a bit of disappointment going into the second leg, because every Brighton fan is still thinking, you never know. If we nick a goal early and then we got the Welbeck goal and you think, well, look, this is still possible. But then in the second half, it kind of dwindles away. But once you get over that, you think so many clubs in the EFL and even the Premier League will have nothing to play for from kind of now, the next few weeks onwards until the end of the season in the running, especially in the EFL when there's so many clubs. If you're in mid-table, you've got clear of relegation. You're not going to get promoted or you're not going to make the playoffs. There's literally nothing to play for, whereas we do have that motivation of getting there again. And Van Heck has come out and said it, and I think all of them, will be under this kind of guidance from De Zerbi of, look, that's your taster. You probably want more now. You didn't want to go and use that disappointment to channel it for next season. And so that's got to be the goal now, is just let's get into Europe. I also think when we say Europe, I personally I'll take Conference League. I'd just get, Europe. We want those European trips again as fans, but also as a club. If we went on and went one better in a knockout stage in the Conference League, that would still be great. And that's still progress for us, I reckon. Yeah,
I mean, I think before we get on to actually whether we will get there or not, I think that we've almost skipped a step, haven't we, as Brighton fans? We've gone from, it was always in our heads about avoiding relegation. That was it, but don't get relegated. Thought we would have done second season, if I'm honest. I thought that was it. Wasn't. By some sort of miracle, Cardiff were somehow worse than us in that season. Palace kept us up, to be fair. Third season, it's that transition, isn't it? And, COVID, it doesn't really stick in the memory quite as much. And then all of a sudden, you could see the chances being created. We went straight up to that sort of 9th spot, I think. and then it's Europa League. To most clubs, it's you get to avoid relegation for 5 years, then you go for mid-table for another 5 years, and then maybe you think about going for Europe. Whereas Brighton, it's been quite a dramatic turn, hasn't it, since we've been in the Premier League? It's been expecting more every year to the point where we're actually now, we wouldn't be that happy if we don't get it next year. You almost don't expect, but very much want it again next year. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's really hard to manage expectations at any club, but especially at Brighton at the moment, because we've got this generational mix as well. So we've got Brighton fans who've only grown up watching football at the Amex, which is unbelievable. And so as they get older, that's been their only experience, and these recent joys and making history in Europe, that's going to be the norm to them. Whereas, of course, you've then got a couple of generations before who watched at the Goldson. I didn't. I'm kind of one of those in between. My first game was at the Priestfield, and I'm from not far away in Kent as well, weirdly. So I'm one of the rare converts. Should be a Gillingham fan, but I'm a Brighton fan. So I watched the majority of my football growing up at the Withdean. And so to come from there, and then, of course, you've got the memories of staying up and Hereford going down, it could have been very different. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's been a meteoric rise. But at any moment, so you mentioned there's almost like a 5-year plan or what have you, or you get solidified, you then look to kick on and get top 10. Throughout any of those seasons, there could be a curveball where you go down and all of a sudden that plan's out the window. So that's what I think is even more incredible about the rise of the Seagulls in the Premier League, is that hasn't happened. And as you say, It's been, touch wood. But I also think that this season, so when, we had some, you're always going to have performances where you don't perform well, always throughout. It's a long season. There were some games in the Premier League where I thought we played okay, we've drawn or we've lost, and a lot of fans thought we've got to be winning those. And you're thinking, for me, all the time at that stage, we're still in Europe. That's what I'm excited about, because we're far enough away from relegation that you're thinking, you're not, taking it for granted, but you are thinking, we touch wood, we shouldn't really go down. If we were in a bit of a relegation scrap, then those results would mean more. But as it was, we're still having a great season, all things told. Maybe not quite, I'm not sure what the points at this stage would have been, but it feels very similar in terms of how we're performing. Maybe slightly less points taken and slightly less. But again, that's with congestion of fixtures. So
and a lot of players have gone as well. I think there's been a lot of change, turnover in players. I think the amount of games has been really, really difficult. You've heard Zerbi emphasise it nearly every single week this year. And he said that he thinks that Brighton have actually had a better year this year, considering everything that's gone on, considering every competition we've had to compete with, the obviously 2 fantastic players that left us. You can't deny it. And there's big hole in that sort of area that you've lost for the first portion of the season. So, with all that considered, do you agree with De Zerbi that we've actually been better this season so far than last season, just on the basis of everything that's happened?
Yeah, exactly. It's such a good point, because there's different dynamics in terms of certain players that go. So no Caicedo, that is a huge miss. When we lost Bissouma, still ever so slightly different players, not exactly the same. So another thing we've done well is we've replaced these players, but it's not always as easy as that. And I think there are someone like Caicedo going is a big Caicedo and McAllister. They were a big 2, right? They were arguably the first 2 names on the team sheet, maybe behind Lewis Dunk. But so I think all told, with that taken in, we're definitely enjoying a better. I mean, Europe on itself, it could, let's say if we don't qualify, that could make it the most historic and enjoyable season that we've ever had, just from that point of view. I think the only real disappointment for me, because I'm always trying to glass half full kind of guy, was the performance in the FA Cup, losing to Wolves, because I think a bit of an Achilles heel, which I'm sure De Zerbi is well aware of, and he's just as frustrated as us, was, it was an early goal, but it was also that error that led to it. Yeah, and against Gary O'Neill, a Gary O'Neill Wolves side at Molineux, after for them taking the lead so early, they're going to be resolute under Gary O'Neill to hold on to that. Don't think we played that badly, but it felt like a bit of a damp squib, obviously, with the fixtures that came as well, the draw that would have been against Coventry. We maybe would have been thinking about Wembley again. So that's really been the only disappointment, the real disappointment for me this season. Some of the results, of course, they feel disappointing at the time in the Premier League, but for reasons I've already mentioned, I think overall, I'd agree with De Zerbi with this is a more successful season all in.
So, end of this season then. I mean, it's not over yet. It's important to remember.
Yeah.
We're almost talking like it's done. It's really not. There's a lot of games to go, big games to go, tough games to go. You've got Liverpool, you've got Chelsea, you've got City, you've got Newcastle, Manchester United, Arsenal as well. We've got all of the big six, I believe, to play. Oh my God. So let's hear some... I don't want to say expectations, but I sort of have to. So some expectations based on the fact we've got to play a lot of the top six. We've got to play teams around us. I think we've got to play Burnley, Bournemouth, and there's one other that's down there as well, isn't there? Can't remember who we've got to play. One of them. What do you think? Because, I mean, is it 7th or 8th, they're saying, for Conference, Europa League? It's still very much on the cards. We are still 8th in the Premier League. Let's let that be told. But there is a good chance that this weekend we go to Liverpool and we do lose. But it's not the end of the world. What's that expectation like for the end of the season?
I think it's probably not too dissimilar to last season. You're always going to come up against City, Liverpool, Arsenal in the closing stages of the season. So I think it's just about those other games. So you mentioned Burnley, you mentioned the clubs that are battling for relegation. They're the ones where we put the emphasis on. Come on, these are the ones we have to win. And we've seen it a few times how much it means against the likes of Nottingham Forest away, getting those results by hook or by crook. They're the ones that carry more importance. But you then think as a collective from those, let's say, 6 games of the so-called Big Six, we can go and get 2 wins out of those 6. It doesn't matter who. We're not thinking about who it is because we want to go into every game with the mentality of we'll win. But as you say, Liverpool, we might lose. It's more likely that we'll lose. So
it's funny you say that though, because Brighton in general, I mean, over the years of all the years of Premier League, we always do sort of worse against teams below us. It's always been some sort of weird problem. I think someone actually mentioned it in the press conference not too long ago to De Zerbi, saying, why is it we lose to teams below us? How does that make any sense? In fact, it might have even been me. And do you not agree with it, though, in a weird way, that you actually look at a game like Liverpool, who are going for the title? This is going to sound absolutely mental if there's a Liverpool fan listening to this, and I'm saying we're going to come to Anfield and have a chance of beating them. But I actually weirdly feel a little bit more confident when the pressure's off us for a moment like that, rather than going to a Bournemouth away, for example, where we have to win. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Definitely, couldn't agree more because the pressure is very much off, and then we can play our high press without any anxiety. We can give it everything, knowing that if we do get beaten 3 or 4-0, 3 or 4-1, whatever it may be, we've gone out there and played the way we want to try and get a result. Guardiola and Klopp always praise us after every game, and I think that's a good sign of respect to us in how we want to go out and play. Whereas if you're playing, I don't want to keep saying Burnley, but I've said Burnley. If you're playing Burnley, if you're playing Sheffield United, if you're playing Bournemouth, maybe Bournemouth not a good example as well.
You get my point now.
Well, they're also gonna do their homework and be more pragmatic. So Wolves is a good shout in that they're stubborn. They're really, really well organised side under Gary O'Neill again. They've kind of reset, and so they know if they get a result against, especially at their place. Or at the Amex, try and turn the crowd on them, and at their place, they know they can then defend their way to a win because the Premier League quality is still very high. So, I think against teams lower down, it's an expectation for if we're at home, that the fans can get on your back a bit quicker, and then think that can translate to the pitch in terms of playing a different way than we normally do. The free-flowing football that Brighton try to, all of a sudden it's whipping it into the box and without really any kind of intent. So, it's an interesting one. And I think because of what you mentioned, you don't know which ones they're going to be, but out of those 6, you think there's no reason why we can't win 2 or 3 out of those 6. And it's because with all of those games, we definitely have a chance. And that's, again, a sign of where we've come as a club, because before, I think Man City was the ultimate one where I'm thinking, we've never been there. There was never a chance. Never a chance. Whereas now we go into a game with Man City, always thinking, even at the Etihad, we've got a chance. Definitely.
Do you know what? It's funny you say that, because at the Etihad we've done well in the last couple of years. Okay, the results maybe don't show it. I think I remember one specifically just come to mind was the Potter season, first year, when we lost 4-0, I think, or 5-0, 4-0. And it looked horrendous when you look at a 4-0 loss, and some of the goals that they scored were out of this world. But if you actually watch that game, I actually thought for a large portion of the game, Brighton were the better team.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy again when you are, a lot of the big six fans will watch that and say, "What are you on about? You lost 4-0." But I think for Brighton fans, you've seen that steady climb of being able to go to these places and not look shell shocked.
Yeah.
And that's maybe something that especially for the end of this season, where the Europa League experience is going to come in a little bit. That night in Roma will be very difficult to forget for Lewis Dunk. That's for sure. That touch that led to a goal, I don't reckon he's probably wiped that out of the memory yet. By the way, a little bit of credit to him for getting his international call up again. Despite the moment that people were giving him stick for, I actually thought it wasn't his fault that bad. But no, I think that experience from players we've got in the squad, Europa League, international football as well. Going into the latter end of the season, surely we've got to be looking at that 7th spot and saying there's no reason why we can't, especially with João Pedro back for Liverpool. But, I mean, look at West Ham, Newcastle, Manchester United, Spurs, Wolves as well. I do think they're 5 teams that, although they're very good, I do think we can match them. Mm-hmm. Do you think?
Yeah, agreed. I think you've hit on a really good point there about that City game where beaten by so many goals. It was quite similar to Roma, in my opinion, as well, in that even though at 1-0 down, we still try and play the same style of football. At 2-0 down, the same thing at 3. So no matter how many goals we've conceded, that's why it's so impressive, is we are still looking to try and win the game. Obviously, second half of the second leg, when you're 4-1 down, it's a bit different, and they know it's a cup tie, so they know they need those goals. Whereas the philosophy is we're not beaten in any game until the final whistle goes. And it does sound cliche, but the point being is if we are 4-0 down with 10 minutes to go in a Premier League game against Manchester City, we're then thinking, right, let's go and get some good. Let's show everybody what we're all about and how we play football. And if you're not 4-0 down, you're 2-0 down, you still very much got a chance, because the moment you get one back, you've got the momentum. And I think that's what De Zerbi has instilled in the team. Maybe slightly differently to Houghton and Potter. Nothing against them. I was sad to see both of them go because of what they've done. They built up some amazing foundations for us. But where De Zerbi has taken the baton on a bit differently, it reminds me of kind of the Peterborough and Southampton of League One yesteryear, where it was we'll score more than you. And it's quite bold to do it, because you are going to get the odd 6-1 defeat to Villa or another huge defeat in there. But it's easier to take when the next game you go out and win, which, touch wood, we've been doing quite a lot this season and last season.
We have. I mean, there's probably a point where Brighton fans are going to want some stability as well, because as much as De Zerbi gets linked with big jobs, you can't go lose 6-0, even if you do win 6-0 the week after, because they won't accept it. A lot of fans don't like to be beaten that big margin at the bigger clubs. I do think we're probably that little bit nicer towards De Zerbi because we all sort of just love him. It does help. But do you think that that's maybe the next step? If you look at next, end of this season into the next season, you can't predict anything because there's a massive summer transfer window to go yet. But surely that's got to be the aim now for the short term, to just be a bit more stable, not have to worry about, okay, we've done well this week, are we going to lose again next? And maybe finding that consistency, with ready-made quality, perhaps. If that, I don't know how to explain it. It's sort of like a.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
it's a weird balance, isn't it? Because you don't want to. You got to be careful for what you wish for as Brighton fans, because as you say rightly, everything can just go completely the other way around. Look at Southampton, look at Bolton, Reading, you name it. There's been plenty of them. But at the same time, there's got to be that element of stability that comes in at some point.
It's got to be a focus. I think going back to what I was mentioning about our Achilles heel, I mean, it's not necessarily just the results. I think it's the manner in which they come about. So I think when we've gone behind early in games is when we've been bamboozled a bit, when we've been caught off guard, and then we can't play.
You look shell-shocked when that happens.
Yeah, so Wolves is a good example of that. Fortunately, they didn't go on to score anymore, but they were happy with that goal lead so early on. Luton is another example. Obviously, 2 goals in the opening 3 minutes.
About that game.
Yeah, well, we've all tried to. I was doing that game for TalkSport International, unfortunately. So again, I was trying to make it sound excitable for the Luton fans, because they were incredible. They were from the off, and they caught us napping, which again is something that Rob Edwards maybe was thinking about. Maybe he'd done his homework, because I've noticed that when we concede early, we are caught off guard and we're bamboozled slightly. And I think that's one tangible that we could try and work on, as you say, to gain a bit more stability, shore ups, open up the game, still want to be on the front foot, but try to resist the temptation to go at it straight from the off. And more importantly, it sounds like Sunday League side when you put it like that, Sunday League kind of level when you put it like this, but just from the off, make sure all the defensive unit are switched on and that a Gross or a Gilmore is in connection for those opening plays, even from the opening seconds, to make sure that if we're driving forward, at least one is back or everybody's covered off the ball.
Plan B, isn't it? I mean, we've had times where people have questioned, whether we've got a real sufficient plan B, which I think it isn't true. I don't think we haven't got a plan B, but I do think that at times it's proven maybe a bit of naivety. We go into sometimes, and then, as you say, we do get that moment of shell shock. But maybe that plan B is that point of, where we need to shore up on going into the end of this season. Just try not to go and get absolutely walloped again, because we want to keep that goal difference looking healthy. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. That's all that we can really say. But let's get a final thoughts then. Final thoughts from you on the end of this season. Where will Brighton finish, and what would be a success, and what would be disappointing for you?
I mean, I hate making predictions because then you're nailed on.
That's why I like saying it.
Well, I'll just be really bland and vague and say I think we will finish in a European position.
Okay.
So that whether that be Conference League
I can accept
or
that.
Europa League, that's what I think we're more than capable for a couple of wins out of the 6 or a couple of wins against the big. So whether we do that against Liverpool, whether we do that against Arsenal or City, we'll see. But I think we're capable of nabbing a couple of wins in there, and then maybe getting a little bit of an unbeaten run along the way for some of the other fixtures as well. Sounds easy when you put it like that, but when the dust has settled from the Europa League, we've had a nice break now for international break as well.
Yeah, we've needed this.
We've needed this, and as you say, players coming back is really important because it's the cliched feeling like a new player. Having João Pedro back will be great. Maybe will inspire someone like an Evan Ferguson. So in short, I'd say, European place.
And the disappointment bit. What would you be disappointed at this stage of the season if we don't get that European place?
Yeah,
or would that be okay?
Yeah, I would. That would be disappointing. Yeah, because that's, as I said earlier, that's the incentive now. So we're fortunate that we have a proper incentive. So many clubs at this stage of the season just don't have an incentive to play good football because their season is over.
Yeah.
They're safe from relegation and they're not going up. Whether that be EFL or Premier League, we have that. That's our number one goal. So when we're talking about trying to shore it up a bit at the back, but we're still fine, that's great. But the reality is, you can take a 5-0 defeat at Liverpool on Sunday if we get into Europe. It will feel horrible if that happens. But at the bigger picture wise, it's all about just getting that done.
Getting that European spot. Yeah, I agree with you. Robert, absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, very good stuff. Very, very good stuff. Make sure you do like, comment, subscribe, and stream on Spotify as well. Make sure you give a follow to Rob. We'll put in his stuff in the description as well. You can pre-book a table via the pub website. Link will be in the description to watch any football match, Premier League, Champions League. Make sure you use the Albion Home on the special requests and notes section of the website. You get 20% off your food and drink, so why would you do it? Come down to Grand Central in Brighton, and we'll see you very soon in the next episode. Goodbye.